all of a sudden I could see my target reader
Mm.
standing in one particular bookstore. And I knew, oh, my ideal reader is somebody who is standing in a bookstore in or around Yellowstone, wanting to take more of the park home. And, I think the same thing is true of fiction. When you write a book, you are offering an experience to someone.
Welcome back to the Business of Christian Fiction. I'm your host, Rachel Fehrenbach, and today I'm joined by my friend, Natalie Ogborn, and we are going to be talking about her memoir. And you might be like, wait, I thought this was a podcast that talks about fiction and that you interview fiction writers. And yes, that is the case. But I was talking to Natalie about her book, and we were discussing how memoir has a lot of the same characteristic traits or a lot of the same kind of crafting as a novel does, where you have setting and characters and dialogue, and you're weaving a story narrative arc throughout the entire book. And we were talking about this, and we were realizing that there's a lot of similarities when it comes to the publishing world and publishing memoir. And I was like, you know what? We need to talk about this on the podcast, Natalie. We need to dive into those of us who want to publish memoir, and the challenges we face are very similar to those of us who want to publish fiction. And so let's talk about this. I'm so excited, Natalie. I'm so excited to get into this conversation. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for asking me. I've really been looking forward to this. I think it'll be fun.
I think so too. So we're going to just like dive right in. Your book is technically memoir. It's not fiction, but like I mentioned, it has, you've had to approach it like it is fiction in a way, like almost like you are crafting a novel. And so let's talk about that side of things first, about the crafting of the memoir, and then we'll kind of dive into more of the publishing side of things and what challenges and decisions you had to make with the book with that. So let's first start with the crafting part. Can you expand on that idea of approaching memoir like a novel?
I can. When I first started, I was naive enough, inexperienced enough that I really didn't even know what I was writing. I just had a story that I was crafting, and I was working on it. And one day it was before podcasts. I don't even know how I came across this, but I learned that what I was writing was called memoir, which I should have been able to figure out. I knew it was true. I knew it was about me. And then I also had the other elements of what it was about. And on that same day, I learned that memoir is, according to this person, the hardest thing to write. And because I am who I am, I went, well, yeah, isn't that just like you, that you would pick the hardest thing to write? Because that's kind of my way. But the reality is, I didn't choose it. It's, you kind of write what God wires you to write, and the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances that He gives you, kind of that intersection. Well, the reason that memoir is tough to write is because it is at the intersection between fiction and nonfiction. It is a
Mm-hmm.
story that's based on fact.
Yeah.
And I, while I was, naive and inexperienced, I knew enough that I couldn't just lay out a bunch of facts. I was telling a story, and I was automatically trying to build the few characters in the memoir into real human beings, because I was dealing with a real place. So I was developing the setting. There was a plot to all the stories within the story. The challenge was to understand what the overarching plot was,
Mm.
um, and also understanding the theme. I knew what I was writing from long before I even started to write it. I knew it was something that was going to happen, but I didn't understand the theme. So all of those elements that you would find in fiction need to be present in memoir. But I think, like probably happens with some fiction writers, maybe not all of them, those things kind of emerge.
Mm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your book, the characters and the setting that you had to craft.
My book is based on my connection to Yellowstone National Park. It's called Waking Up in the Wilderness, A Yellowstone Journey. And it started when I was 12, when my parents took me to Yellowstone, my little brother and I, to show us there was more to life than malls and movies. And it's something that changed my life. It didn't change it immediately, but over repeated visits, it did. And I started to see that I was learning more about life and walking by faith by walking in the wilderness. And I didn't even like to hike for decades. I'd probably been visiting Yellowstone for 20 years before I started to like hiking. I just I wasn't a fan, and now I am. But I was learning things in Yellowstone that mattered to my life. And when I was still really in the thinking stages of the story, I knew I was telling the story. So I was obviously a character. The people that I interacted with that went to Yellowstone with me or took me to Yellowstone, they were characters. God isn't a character, but he's present within the story. And Yellowstone is the setting. But early on, I thought of it as kind of a cord of three strands almost. There was
Yeah.
my story and those people, and there was God, and there was Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my endorsers, his endorsement says that Yellowstone is almost as much of a character as my family and I, and that just thrilled me to no end because I knew that I got it.
Yeah.
I made the setting a character in the story, and that meant something to me.
Yeah. I think that when you see an author really hone in on that, when they really realize that the setting plays as much a role in the story as the
Mhm.
characters do, you start to see them pull in elements of the surrounding area, and play off of it and use it in a way to bring the story along. And when people do this in novels, I'm always like, yes, because I think it just brings a richness to the story. Um, it feels like it was almost imperative that you did that in your memoir because it
Mm.
had such an effect. Like you're being affected by the setting. Your character development is in relationship to the setting around you. So
Mhm.
whereas you might interact with somebody with dialogue or body language, and that impacts your growth as a character in your memoir, you interacting with the surrounding setting, that interaction between you and
Yeah.
that setting has that growth impact for your character in the memoir. So that's really cool. I think it's a really neat thing what you did with the memoir. And I got to read it as an early advanced reader. And I think that you did a fabulous job with that. So
Thank you.
kudos to that.
Thank
Um,
you.
with the memoir, because I think a lot of us are like, oh, I want to process something. I might write down part of my story. At what point did you think this is something I want other people to read?
I think I always thought I wanted somebody to read it,
Mm,
even before I started writing it. And I think I knew it was a book for a good 5 years before I sat down and started writing, period. And then I started online just for discipline, like you, I
mm-hmm.
homeschool. And one day as I was carrying laundry through with my kid, like my kids were at the table doing writing assignments and I'm working on laundry. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can sit down and write while they write. And
Yeah.
a lot of those were Yellowstone stories. So when I sat down to write the book, I wrote it with the intention of being published. It was just a little bit of a slow progression, but I always knew that I wanted it to be published for people
Yeah.
in some way, more than just my family.
Did you did you set out to traditionally publish it?
I did.
Your book is self-published. This episode will release later, but at the time we're recording this, your book actually just released yesterday. And so that is so exciting. You self-published it. And
Hmm.
I think it would be really interesting for us to kind of go down that conversation of how did you come to that decision to self-publish? What were some of the challenges that you faced along that publishing journey? And what things maybe surprised you. So what brought you
Okay.
to this point?
If I don't answer any of the questions you asked and they're good, remind me of them.
Yeah.
I will start with how I started. I went to a writer's conference when I submitted the first three chapters of the book, and one of the gals a senior editor from Baker met with me, and she said, I set your manuscript aside and I sent it to this other gal who I was also going to be meeting with. And she said, this is the kind of stuff people buy in airports.
Mm.
So I met with a gal from a different editor, and she looked at it, and they considered it, and they came back with, this is a really small niche. I mean, Yellowstone and faith. And it is. I read outdoor uh memoir. I
Mm-hmm.
read the outdoor adventure stories. Well, there weren't any in the Christian space. And so
Yeah.
I thought, well, I want to write that for this space. And one actually had been published within a year or two before that. I finally found one. And as I was working through that process, the niche that his was in was somewhat larger than Yellowstone's, but the crossroads between Yellowstone and the Christian market is really small. And so I took that back and went, okay, this is a really small niche. What am I going to do? And I just thought about it for a lot of years. I worked on my book and thought about it, and because I like writing and I like rewriting, and I never just gave up. I it just didn't do anything for a while. I went to another writer's workshop with a gal who has written uh, in this genre, and um, she said the Christian market will have you take one of these stories and put it into a chapter, and then they'll want you to write a little explanation in case people didn't understand, and
Mm-hmm.
then they'll want you to do questions.
Mm-hmm.
And she held my chapters up and she said, I don't think this is that kind of book. That's not what you want here. You're
Yeah.
telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put it down again and I just let it sit. Those are my challenges. Those
Yeah.
were the big challenges that I faced, just mostly to know what to do with it. The other little piece is knowing who I was really, really writing for.
Mm-hmm.
And that eventually emerged. I think we started with, how did I get to this point?
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I are in a prayer pod with Julie. And in 2023, I watched her go through the process of self publishing her book from a very neutral posture, not a posture of, oh, I don't think that's a good idea, nor, oh, I'm watching to see how this goes for her. I
Mm-hmm.
just watched her go through it and I celebrated. And at the end of when she did that, I thought, you know what? You just need to finish your book. You need to get it ready to go out there. I didn't
Yep.
have a plan to publish. I just decided I needed to get it ready to go out there. And I said that out loud to my family at the end of 2023 because I was partway done with that process. I said, I want the book ready to be self published by the end of 2024. I
Mm-hmm.
had zero plan at all. But watching someone else go through that process um, didn't convince me of anything. I
Right.
think it prepared me for something
Mm-hmm.
because January 2nd of 2024, I contacted a gal I'd known for a long time. I'd known of. She
Okay.
writes Christian fiction about the national parks. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, historical fiction. It's good stuff. Actually, her most
Most-
recent one involves the 1970s.
Oh, okay.
So I contacted her, even though I'd known about her for a long time, because I saw her book in Yellowstone.
Like
Um,
actually like physically in Yellowstone, like in the
yes,
bookstore.
in
Okay.
the bookstore, in a gift shop. And
Uh-huh.
I never thought I'd see a book with any kind of Christian bent at all here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I contacted her and I just said, how did this happen? And she was very kind and she told me a lot of different things. But what that conversation did was I instantly understood my avatar, not not because of our conversation, but the time was just right. All the things had been sitting and waiting. And my avatar, I'd wrestled with it and it just seemed like the most useless exercise to me.
And by
understand.
avatar, for those who might not understand that language, because that's kind of in the business space, we use that
Yeah,
term a lot, is your avatar, your customer profile. So it's just your reader, the person
your
who's going to
reader.
pick up your book and buy it. I
Yeah,
just wanted to
yeah.
clarify that.
No, that's good. I didn't understand my target reader, and I,
Hmm.
sitting there and sorting through, is it a man or a woman? Where does she shop? What does she like to drink? Where does, that just seemed it, I could never ever get that. But I had this email interaction with this author, and all of a sudden I could see my target reader
Mm.
standing in one particular bookstore. And I knew, oh, my ideal reader is somebody who is standing in a bookstore in or around Yellowstone, wanting to take more of the park home. They
Mm.
wanted to experience more of the park than they got to while they were there. And I can offer that. The book I've already written offers that. It's
Right.
decades worth and over all the seasons. And I understood exactly who it was. Now, is a armchair traveler also going to be able to experience more of Yellowstone? Yes. But I understood exactly who I was writing for. And, I think the same thing is true of fiction. When you write a book, you are offering an experience to someone. I just didn't know who that experience was for.
Oh, I love what you said there, that you didn't know who the experience was for. And I love that you're like, this was a useless exercise of like trying to figure out who this ideal reader was. I love your honesty because it can feel like that. I've noticed this with fiction writers too. They're like, why am I wasting my time doing this? Anybody can read my book. It's for everybody, right? But I
Mhm.
love the fact that when you identified who your targeted reader was, it gave you like a really specific purpose, right?
Mhm.
This book in this shop for this
Mhm.
person to pick up at the end of their trip. And it's
Mhm.
not saying that other people can't read it. I mean, I love it. I think everybody should read it. I think it is beautiful. And I think it opens up my eye. Like, it makes me want to go visit Yellowstone. I've never really, like, I've always been like, oh, that'd be cool to go to Yellowstone one day. But now I'm like, now we have to go to Yellowstone because Natalie has painted just such this beautiful picture and I want to be there to see it for myself. So I'm sure that there will be many people who will read it and experience it, but by really honing in on who your customer is, it gives you a sense of a pathway of how to walk. And I would encourage anybody who is a fiction writer right now who is like, I don't know who my customer is and I really don't care. Like, it's just for anybody. I would encourage you to be persistent with it, like Natalie was, and just continue to walk it out and keep asking yourself that question because it does help give you a sense of purpose when it comes to the
Mhm.
publishing side of it. It helps
Mhm.
you narrow down what you want to even do with it. Even going back to the fact that you knew you had a story and you wanted it to unfold like a story. You wanted it to be something a person experienced, not a lesson for them to learn,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
not a self help book, it's not a lifestyle book. It was a story for them to just experience. And knowing that part of it allowed you to say, this traditional publishing model isn't going to, at least where the Christian space is right now, there's not a place for this book there.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it allows you to say no to something that's good because it's not the best thing for your book, and it allows you to say yes to what is best for the book.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
the
And the
interesting thing
interesting
to me
thing to
was,
me was, I
I
identified this
identified this
reader
reader
and
and
where they were
where they were
standing.
standing.
And
And
it's not like I went back and changed a lot about the book.
Yeah.
I just knew more, and I tweaked things here and there. And yes, I was thinking about the Christian market, but I hadn't written a self-help Christian living book. I'd written a book
Right.
about creation, you know?
Yes.
And so it's not like I went in and took things out or added things. It's the same book for the most part. I knew some things that I wanted to flesh out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But it changed me. It didn't change the book. It changed what I brought to the book
Mm.
in terms of a purpose and excitement, like you said, and then understanding of what needs to happen after the business
Yes.
element of it.
Yeah.
That's what
I
it
love
changed.
that. It didn't change how you crafted it per se. Like, you tweaked it, like you said. It changed what you did with it afterwards. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes we forget, especially fiction writers, people who are writing experiences, right? We can get caught up in the crafting of the experience, not realizing that there are specific things that we need to do to bring that experience to the person. We can't bring the experience to the person if we don't know who that person is or the avenue of how to get them there. So once you realized all of that, once you realized who your customer was going to be, who you wanted to pick up this book, what was the step you took next?
Actually, the step I took next was I went through a quick self-publishing, how to self-publish your book course
Mhm.
that was really helpful. And
What was the name
then
of that one?
it was through Flourish Writers, and
Okay.
I think it might be how to self-publish your book. I think.
All right.
And one of their homework questions were, what are your goals? And so when my husband and I sat down, he was very on board with moving forward, and because he's always believed in this project,
Hmm.
always,
Yeah.
that there was a purpose there.
Yeah.
And he's like you, Rachel. He had all the post-it notes out, and he's, going to town on stuff. And I said, well, one of the questions were, what's your goal here? And he said, well, what is your goal? And I said, well, I like the book to pay for itself. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay. And then I said, what I'd really like is I'd really like to see it in this bookstore. And he is actually a lot like you, Rachel. He's kind of a visionary, and his face lit up and he said, now that's a goal I can get behind. The much
Yeah.
more difficult to attain goal that he could get behind.
So I just read an article on actually on Dave Ramsey's website, not the financial piece. He has what's called entre leadership. So it's like leadership for entrepreneurs. Like he talks about being an entrepreneur and leading and all that. And it was talking about strategic planning, and they talked about, I forget the acronym, but essentially it's a big audacious goal. Like it's something
Mm,
that's so big and out there. They actually went back and they put what Dave Ramsey's goals were in like 1995, and then they put what actually happened that year. And then the
mm,
next year, what his big goals were and what actually happened. And there was like, he didn't hit those big goals. But their whole point is by having the big goal, he had something to aim for and it
mhm,
spurred him on and he went for
mhm,
it. And if he hadn't gone for the big goal, he wouldn't have made the progress that he did.
mhm,
And that those big goals are what actually help us to move past just being stagnant, right? And
mhm,
for me personally, that was a little convicting because I'm like, oh, let's do little goals so I can hit
mhm,
it and I can
mhm,
have a sense of like accomplishment. Because I look at when I don't hit those big goals as it being a failure.
mhm,
And just reading that article helped me to reframe it a little bit. Like, no, you put the big goal out there and you run for it. And if you don't hit it, it's not a failure because you've made progress along the way. And so um, yeah, I'm with your husband. I'm like, okay, let's do the big goals. Let's have the
yeah.
big goals to work for. Um, but I think it's a little scary though to make the big goals.
Yeah, it is. And to your point, an interesting thing that happened is Jamie and I were out in Yellowstone a couple of weeks ago, and I was in that bookstore,
Hmm.
as well as some other ones. I scoped out some other ones in the area that aren't associated with the Park Service. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay if my book doesn't end up here. I would love it, but there are other things that I've discovered along the way that matter more.
Mm,
And I would love it if it's there. But at this point, I see it as something that got me to where I needed to be
hmm.
rather than the ultimate end goal.
Hmm.
It'll be frosting on the cake if I end up there,
Yeah,
but it served me well.
yeah.
So,
So after you guys set those goals and that
mhm.
big goal, then what did you do?
I contacted the editor that had done my sample chapters and book proposal in the past, and she's a fiction editor. She was a good fit, but I made some decisions too about, well, do I want to kind of actually take this to bookstores in the Yellowstone area in the fall or in the spring? Well, fall's a bad idea because things are literally closing down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking, okay, maybe you could get this done in time to get it out there this spring. And I first needed to find out if the editor was available. Well, she was, but then I realized that was just not going to be a good idea for getting the book done well and for my mental health. So um, I relooked at my timeline, and that was the only time she had open. So I needed to find a different editor. So I finished the book. I lined up the editor. I found someone to design my cover. And I just started doing all those little things and pushing forward. I set up a timeline, which I changed, and I worked on getting endorsers, and I just did all the things that needed for it to happen by this fall, even though I wasn't planning to release it until next, like April, May of 2025.
So
To get it.
why did you make sure that it could have been released this fall, even though you wanted it for the spring?
I wanted to have a deadline. I mean, there's probably a few answers. One is probably God. Another is probably I wanted to have a deadline and not just be working on it indefinitely. It obviously
Mm,
I'd been working on it for a lot of years. I wanted to finish the book, and if the book was finished, I wanted everything about the book to be finished, not just
mm,
my part about the book to be finished. And it's a
mm-hmm.
good thing I did because I had a really hard time stopping writing the book. I
Yeah,
I that that was of writing the book, of the actual writing process. That was the hardest part for me, stopping.
yeah. I think many of our listeners are going to resonate with that because you can always improve on everything. And especially when you're writing scenes, when you're writing these snippets of like a story, it's one thing to put something out there that's nonfiction and it's kind of prescriptive and kind of, or explaining or teaching or whatever it is. You can get it pretty succinct and you're like, oh, that's good. Like it's summarized pretty well. It's taught pretty well. It's very clear, right? There's like some kind of, natural, just this is as good as it needs to be. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
writing, I think prose or even poetry, you can get so caught up in, is the image coming through here? Is the imagery coming through?
Mm-hmm.
Is the dialogue as best as it could? Could I use a different word here to invoke a certain feeling? Like you just get so into the finite details of really fine tuning that scene. And it's like you could always do it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you. Like at some point, you're just going to have to say, like, enough is enough. I got to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you did that. And I think that's so wise. And as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I need to make myself a final deadline because I can do the same thing. So you got yourself a final deadline. You've got a cover. You got an editor. You did the layout yourself, right?
I did. I did.
Yeah. So for those of you who are considering self-publishing, Vellum is a tool you can use. If you don't have a Mac, then Atticus is another
Mhm.
good one. Um, so you taught yourself how to do some things along the way.
I did. I did.
So you then have this like a soft release in October. You
Hmm.
chose to
Hmm.
release the book, even
Hmm.
though you have this bigger release in the spring that you're
Hmm.
hoping to do. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can. Again, that kind of unfolded in the same way that I think it's time to write the book thing. Actually, I had a conversation with a gal at the end of the self-publishing course. And as part of that, I had a one-on-one conversation, and it kind of led into I had some questions about book launches, and we talked about long game and that kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? It's done. It's not going to get better sitting
Right.
on the computer waiting. And I thought, you know what? Why not just release it now? The reason I was going to release it in the spring is because that's when most outdoor adventure books are released. During the
Yeah,
summer, when it's warm and we can go outside and have outdoor adventures.
you're right.
And I thought, let's just get it out there for people to read this winter when they can't get outside. And I'll have an opportunity for people to read it and get reviews for when I do present it to bookstores that are local to the Yellowstone area.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, the people in my life that I care about that are already reading my work will have a chance to read it. And so I can release this part of it now, and then I can go and launch it to its geographical area where people are going to run across it more often in bookstores, the bookstores
Mm-hmm.
that it gets into. I will probably at the same time release the audiobook. My intention had been to do all that at one time, but I'll have a
Yeah.
new product to offer. Again, it was one of those things. I've prayed a lot about my book over the years, but the individual decision to deciding to finish it or deciding to launch it, we prayed about that, already having a strong sense that, yeah, I think this is the direction we should go.
Right.
I just feel like a lot with this at this end of the book has just kind of unfolded naturally. Just sort of a way opened up, a way
Mm-hmm.
forward, and I walked through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how your sense of your customer and your end goal have helped shape your decision making. And I think that's
Mhm,
really important for our listeners to hear that having those things in place keeps you from just throwing spaghetti on the wall. Now, will you trial and error things as you go along? Yes, you will. But it gives you a path forward when you know what those are. And for you, you're
mhm,
like, I can release it in October and I don't need to do like a huge big launch or anything like that because this is a stepping stone to what I'm trying to do in the spring.
mhm, mhm,
And that gives you the ability to say no to some of the more like traditional things that people do when they release a book, right? It
mhm,
allowed you to pick and choose what was best beneficial to you. And I think just having that clarity of like what your purpose was gave you the ability to say, like, this is what I need it to do for me. This is what I need it to be. Will there be benefits along the way? Yes. But at the end of the day, this is ultimately what my eyes are fixed on is this goal over
mhm,
here. And I'm going to take steps towards that. Um, so I love the fact that week after week praying together in our so we have been in a prayer pod for about 3 years now together with some other ladies who are also online, have online businesses or writing as authors. And so I've gotten to see you walk this out over the last year and have heard some of your um, decision making. And so from even the way that your cover was designed, knowing that you want it in the bookstore, your title, the endorsers that you chose to go for, knowing that they're really well known in this national park space and then especially writing about it. Um, and I think all of that is a testament to the fact that you know what your goal is. You know
mhm,
who your person is. I know it sounds like I'm probably harping on this, but I think from all the information we get out there, all of the this is what you need to do in order to publish a novel. This is what you need to do in order um, to get your book out there. I don't think we talk enough about this. I don't think we talk enough about really knowing who it is that you're serving and what your goals are with your book and how that book is going to serve those people that you're serving. I hear it a lot in the business space and even in the nonfiction space, but it doesn't it doesn't happen a whole lot in the fiction space. And so I really just love the fact that how you have just been walking this out and been really intentional and strategic. And it all goes back to that getting your customer and your goals dialed in.
mhm.
Would you agree with that? Like, has that really been a structure for you to follow? Like, it has it given you a framework for knowing how to move forward?
It absolutely has. It absolutely has. It affected my conversation with my cover designer, because one thing I knew about my book was I was in a writers group. There were men in the group and women in the group, and men and women both responded to the book differently, but
Hmm.
with equal intensity. And So I I knew that I wanted a cover that did not say this is a book for women. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted a book that said this is a book that is not for men.
Yeah.
This is I don't want to use the word gender neutral, but I wanted it to just be a book that would appeal to someone who wanted more of the outdoors, whether that was
Mm-hmm.
a man or a woman. And my I don't know a lot about fonts, but my cover designer knows more than me, and we talked about that. And um when it came to choosing my endorsers, I could have gotten lots of endorsers that they were just names that people weren't going to look at. But I thought, okay, from what I understand, women will read books written by men, but not as many men read books written by women. And so I
Mm-hmm.
thought, you know what? Guys like this book. Several guys that I'm not related to have read this book and liked it. How do I communicate to them that there's something for you here? And so all of my endorsers are men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the woman representative. I wrote the book, and I have three endorsers. One of them wrote the book that I mentioned earlier, the Christian memoir about hiking the Appalachian Trail. So he's
Mm-hmm.
been out and done the thing. One of my endorsers is a outdoorsman poet from the state of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final one was actually a Yellowstone lifer ranger archivist.
Wow.
And so, yes, it was frustrating when I did not understand who my target reader was, like, because it just seemed like, why does this even matter? I can't figure it out. And I tried blood, sweat, and tears trying to figure that out. It mattered so much, but I think I understood when the time was right. But it factored into everything. It factored into all the decisions I made after I made the decision to move forward.
Yeah. So, do you think that you would recommend to somebody to just get the book finished and then worry about the customer? Or do you think that that's something that can be done simultaneously?
Before you got that far, simultaneous,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think we just have to do the work of writing, and a lot of this stuff emerges while we're doing the work.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That's good. Okay. So let's move on to some more fun, like lighthearted things.
Oh, yeah, because that was fun.
No. Well, let's just before we move on to like just talking more like tactical things like tools and tips and things like that. What would you say was the most surprising part of this entire process of writing this memoir and publishing it?
I still like my book. I hear people say they get to the end of writing their book and they've had to reread it so many times, and then they're promoting it and all this stuff, and they don't even like it by the time they're done. Every time I sit down and reread my book, it's not a sense of, oh, this is the most wonderful book ever. I just I like my book. It makes me
Hmm.
happy. Now they're
Yeah.
my memories and they're happy memories, but I kind of had a little bit of uh, concern, maybe. Like I would hear people say that, and I didn't like hearing that.
Hmm.
Uh, Probably because there's a lot of people who don't like writing that write books. They say they
Yes.
don't like writing and they write
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
And as someone who is a writer, I love writing. The idea
Hmm.
that I might not like my book at the end of it was
Yeah.
disturbing to me.
Yeah.
So that was a very pleasant reality to get this far into the process and still like my book. Along with that, I've done things that I'm not good at. They're not things that God naturally gifted me at, and I've survived.
Survived. Yes, you did. You didn't just survive, you thrived.
I
So
did.
that's
I did.
you did. And I think that that is a good um a good word for all of us. Like we will encounter things. And even if you go the traditional publishing route
Mm,
or a hybrid or whatever, you're going to encounter things that make you uncomfortable, maybe push you outside of where you know you are skilled at, and
mhm,
being willing to just be open to learning new things, and being confident that you can figure it out, and being confident that you're going to be okay on the other side of it
mhm,
um,
mhm.
is important for all of us to learn. Okay, I like to ask my guests who come on here what a tool or tip they have for writers. Maybe something that you are like, I could not have written my book without this, or even maybe not that drastic, but like this was extremely helpful, and I think everybody should look into maybe using this tool. Is there anything like that for you?
I have a couple. One is Vellum. I've not used Atticus, but Rachel knows I don't love the tech end of things, and figuring them out is not intuitive for me.
Hmm.
And Vellum was so fun to use and figure out. And if you have a good tool, formatting your own book is not a difficult thing. It's actually probably kind of a joy to watch it come together.
Yeah.
So from a tool perspective, that would be it. From a resource perspective, the people in your circle that know about writing and business, especially writing as a business, everybody knows something that the rest of us don't know.
Hmm.
And ask the questions at the right time. Like this gal that has the book, the national park books. I've known about her for years. Well, all I could have said was, "Hey, I want to write a national park book too." I wouldn't have had anything to bring to the table for a conversation.
Hmm.
But when the time was right, I asked a very simple question, and the answer she gave me was far more robust than I expected.
Yeah.
Because people are generous. That's part of that, not using people as a resource, but taking advantage of the people God brings into your path to ask them the question, because they know things that you don't know, and you know things that other people don't know. And we can help each other out and encourage one another in untold ways
Yeah.
in that.
I found that a lot of people are really um, eager to help other people. They're like, "Hey,
Mm,
I struggled doing this." Just today, a friend of mine started a podcast, and I was like, "Oh, what's the link so I can go subscribe to it?" And so I listened to the first couple episodes, and um, I just sent her a quick message. I was like, "Hey, did you know?" Because I know what editing program she's using for her podcast, and I was like, "Did you know there's a tool in there that does this for your sound?" Because I didn't know that. I didn't know that for the longest time, and it changed everything in my podcasting. It made it sound more like that studio quality. It took out the background
mm,
noise. And so
mhm,
I'm like, I would have loved to have known that right away. And so I passed along that tip to her, so that she can use it going forward, right? Like, so she didn't have
mhm,
to like take forever to learn it like I did. And so I find that a lot of people um, are willing to give that kind of information and be like,
mhm,
oh, you know what I couldn't figure out for the longest time is this. This is where you need to go for this and this and this. So don't be afraid to ask, because I
mhm.
think a lot of people understand how hard this whole writing business is. Well, as we begin to wrap this up, Natalie, what advice would you have for somebody who maybe is considering writing memoir and maybe has kind of brushed it off as like not possible because the Christian market is very limited in getting
Mhm.
published, um, or even somebody who is a fiction writer who you might just have some words of advice for them too. What would you like to say to them?
Well, first of all, write it down, because
Mm,
if I hadn't written the things down when I did, I don't think I'd remember them as well today, because there's a lot of new memories on top of it, and I didn't make this stuff up. So, you know, write it down. If you've got a good fiction idea, record it. If it's a memoir type thing, record it. The other thing is, an agent I talked to at the writers conference where I, first presented this book, he's he's digging into it, and he's just like going through the pages, and he said, I I've never thought about anything like this. I've
Mm,
never read anything like this. I've never even heard of anything like this. He said usually our memoir is medical or trauma. And so and there's a place for that, but
yep.
there's a place for a lot of things. If
Hmm.
And the beautiful thing about memoir is it's not a biography. It doesn't start at the beginning of your life and end when you're dead. It's a portion of
Right.
something that has mattered to you,
Mm,
whether it's baseball or, grandma's kitchen or whatever it is. It's like fiction in that way. You
hmm.
are setting up a story of something that matters, that's touched your life, and it can touch somebody else's life. It can make a difference. And there's a lot more to the things that touch our lives and show us God at work than just um, recovery from difficult things that happen. We get to see him at work in the beautiful things that he has done. Now, granted, I faced some hard things out on the trail. There's always growth in memoir. There is a place for all kinds of stories, whether they are fiction or they're like mine and they're at the crossroads of fiction and fact.
So good. Good. Well, Natalie, I'm so grateful that you came on my podcast today. I think it'll be such an encouragement to those who are writing stories that are very niched, and not just memoir that is niche, but even fiction stories that are
Mhm,
just a little bit outside of the norm, and
mhm.
it might feel like there might not be a place for it in traditional publishing. I just think that your story is one of encouragement to just keep thinking about who it is that you're going to serve and how you're going to serve them, and to start taking steps towards getting your book to them in whatever way it needs to happen. And so I just am so grateful that you came on the podcast today.
Well, I was thrilled when you asked. I've really been looking forward to it. I thought it would be fun, and it has been.
I've enjoyed it too. So before we go, please tell us about exactly how to go get your book. And my copy is like on its way. I've been tracking with it on Amazon. It's supposed to be here like this afternoon. I was like, gosh darn it. I was hoping to be able to hold it up. But it is a lovely book. I have enjoyed it. I am going to be recommending it to everybody, and just in time for Christmas. So those of
Yeah,
us who have people who enjoy the national parks, can you maybe tell us how to find you on socials? Tell us how to find your book and all those things.
I can do that. The book is Waking Up in the Wilderness, A Yellowstone Journey, and it's on Amazon. I am at natalieogborn.com. That's my website. On Instagram, you can find me at Natalie_Ogborn. And through my website, natalieogborn.com, you can sign up and get the prologue and the first 3 chapters. It's just called A Glimpse into Waking Up in the Wilderness, and you can see if you like it.
And we'll link to that in the show notes too, so people can definitely opt into that and get those first 3 chapters. I think you'll definitely want to read those, and then you're going to want to go buy the book. I mean, it's just a given. Well, thank you again, Natalie, for joining us. For those of you who are listening, thank you for joining us this week, and join us back here next time as we continue the conversation about the business of Christian fiction.